Thank you, Pat.
You're welcome.
Okay. Okay, so my advanced key, there we go. One of the results of the fire is that it will just limit access for many years to come. The Forest Service is going to have to rebuild the roads and the bridges for us to get in there. And so during that time, I think it's going to be important that we kind of share with the community of people who are familiar with Opal Creek, who've been there, who love it, who support it, with what's happening to the forest while we can't get up there to see it. And to show people that recovery is starting to happen in particular. I think that if we can show how the forest is recovering, that's going to be helpful to people like me that, were hit hard by the loss. And so it'll be really a useful thing to have photos in that sense. Nathan Reynolds, who's the executive director of the Opal Creek Ancient Forest Center, the Education Center, suggested that we actually do a more rigorous form of documentation. So he suggested, for example, that we photograph places like this that we saw before the fire and go back and photograph the same places post-fire and show the changes and then show how the regeneration and regrowth is happening in those places. And then our friend Paul Fishman, who's a biologist, built on top of that with the idea of let's find some places where we can set markers and have them recorded on the GPS so that we can consistently go up there and know that we're at the same place every time and show how things are progressing, possibly over a very long time span of the next few years anyway. And I really like that idea. I thought that was really interesting. Nathan said that he liked it too because that these kind of images could really help with the research into forest ecology about how this area recovers. And it turns out you can get there. So that's important, I think. One way is to go to Elk Lake and then hike in down Battle Axe Creek. If you've been to Opal Creek and you've been to the Education Center, you know that Battle Axe Creek comes in right there, just the other side of the Education Center, and meets up with Opal Creek and then becomes the little North Fork of the St. Anne. And the Battle Axe Creek Canyon was not as affected by fire. You don't run into the fire until you're almost to Jawbone Flats. So it's possible to hike in that way. And then Nathan, amazingly enough, just sent me an email a couple of days ago saying that they had gone in on the old road and it was doable. You just had to scramble over a lot of downed, burned trees. So it means that we could have a group of photographers, of people who are interested, to be going up there over time and be able to access through those two ways. Cabin 4 didn't burn, so there's a place to stay if you get there. So you wouldn't necessarily have to, backpack in with a lot of stuff. And obviously we have to work out the details of this with Nathan. He really wants to be able to manage this idea of who gets in there. But there's a potential there for a collaborative effort and for us to have access. And this, other people have asked me about this photo, and this is, the previous one was one of the pools near a cedar grove. I call it the pool at Cedar Flat. And here I'm just standing on the edge of that pool and looking down at the water flowing over my feet. It's only a couple of inches deep, but it creates these gorgeous ripple patterns. So what I wanted to say here was, I know that we already have a whole bunch of members who've been to Opal Creek. We've gone up there a couple of photography weekend kind of things. I started out by asking some of the members if they wanted to donate the rights, reproduction rights to photos to the Ancient Forest Center so they could make things like cards and posters and sell them on their website. But I think that there's a much deeper pool than that of people who have work. So that led to another idea put forth by Susan Turner. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But that idea kind of opened the door of doing more donations in different forms. And what she specifically suggested was the idea of having a gallery show. So we would pool the work that our members have done, find a place to do it, and put them up. And hopefully we're all willing to donate some or all of the proceeds from making sales at an event like that. And plus, I think it would draw a lot of attention and awareness, which would be good. Susan really likes that idea. And so if there's other people who might be interested in participating in that, I'd say it'd be a good idea to get a hold of her and tell her that you have some interest. I should stress that all of this stuff is kind of at the initial planning stages that really aren't hard decisions or anything. It's pretty fluid, but that it also means that you can have a role in figuring out what we're going to do and how it's going to work. That would be very much appreciated, that kind of support. And by the way, I should say, to put in a plug, that these photos at Blue Sky are all for sale. The gallery keeps half, but the other half, if I do sell any, I'm donating to the Ancient Forest Center. The other thing I thought about having a gallery show was that's something that we could do ourselves on our own website too. So I've talked to the Opal Creek Center staff about that. They would be interested in having a gallery show of Opal Creek photos on their website. So it's possible we could create the same show and just put it in two different places and let people know where they could see these things. So that was a kind of interesting possibility. And that discussion led, as you can guess, Pat and others, to the idea of an Opal Creek book that would consist of the photos that we've all done up there over the years. And we would need somebody to help pull that together and curate it as we've done in the past. So that's another way that at least some of the proceeds of that might be a donation that we could make to support them. This is my favorite time of year to be up in Opal Creek because it's when the late summer and the water drops, the trees start to turn. You get these just amazing reflective patterns in the water. But I just want to kind of emphasize that I think we as a group have a lot of potential in terms of our abilities and what we've done in the past to pull all that together and create a lot of support for this forest that we've all cared about so much over the years. I think that just in talking to people, Susan and Pat Welly, Phil, Steve, Mike Osborne, Bill Kirby, other people, there've been a lot of very positive responses to this, even though it isn't shaped yet. We don't know exactly what we're going to do, but it just seems like people are really kind of interested in getting on board. This one I always have to explain. So what happens at Opal Creek and in Battle Axe Creek is it sometimes forms gravel islands, and they're kind of temporary, but the willows will start to grow in them anyway. And then if the water disturbs the gravel around the willow roots, you see them and they're this bright scarlet color when they've just first been exposed. And then within a very short time, a few hours, they start to turn brown. So if you happen to be there, you'll see it, especially in the spring when the water's high. And then the rest of the year, you wouldn't probably notice it if that happened because it'll just be a dull brown. So these are the willow roots. So I think I'm just going to close here by repeating that if you're interested in this and you want to know more, I'd really appreciate it if you get hold of me or you get hold of Susan or Pat Welly. And we'll try to make sure that whatever kind of discussions that we're having, that we're sharing it out with everybody so you all know what's going on, even if there's kind of a subgroup working on the thing. We don't really have that set up yet, but that's one thing that I think would be really important going forward. Okay.
Hey, Mike, can I ask you a handful of questions about all that?
Yeah.
I'm curious, is there any place up there where maybe this exhibition could take place? Because that would really be, I mean, I don't know if there's anything left or any place nearby or some sort of other forestry related place, or maybe even the forestry center. I don't know.
The force, it's funny, Ray. I thought about that too. We might go ask them if they would be willing to host something like that. But yeah, I think a lot of Elkhorn Valley burned and Opal Creek burned. I mean, going up the Little North Sandiam, it's just it's going to be a couple of years anyway before that all gets rebuilt to the point where you could get up there. So it would make more sense to do it someplace around here, and it would make it easier for people to participate and to come and share.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We ought to follow up on.
And I think your idea of getting, I mean, because I know that PPF has been up there many times, and so you're correct that there's probably lots of great photographs available. But some more now would be really an interesting piece. And you think that's something that could be possibly part of this?
Yes. We really need a team of photographers who are willing to commit to going up there over the next few years. And I'm willing to do that for as long as I'm, able. I've been over that route from Elk Lake, the 8 miles backpacking, and it's a pretty good workout to get there. But I think it's doable even for people our age to get in on those routes. What we need is really like a group of people who are saying, okay, I'm willing to put in this kind of effort over some period of time so that we can set up that consistent pattern of making images as things regrow and share those out in the world.
Nice. Does anybody else have questions for Mike?
I've stunned them into silence.
Yeah.
Have you been up there since the fire, and do you have any pictures to share of those?
Something.
No, I thought that it was inaccessible. I was surprised when Nathan a couple of days ago told me that they had climbed in there over the old road. They had to kind of work their way around the half-burned bridges and over a lot of burned trees, but they did it.
Hey, Mike, Paul here. Nathan shared a couple of photos the other day, before and after, and one of your early photos just now was a overview of the valley.
Yeah.
Nathan shared kind of that same photo after the fire, and it's really, really remarkable. Maybe you can share that with the group somehow. But just to see the devastation, although as an ecologist, I have to say fire is natural and it will regrow. But
I think
that picture now, and Nathan shared one that all of those trees are just black trunks, basically. Yeah.
Hard to believe, isn't it, when you think about what it used to look like? But I personally have felt like I really like this idea of supporting the regrowth of the forest and the research and the center and for future education. It's a real help to me to get around my feelings of loss from like seeing those images of what the place is like now and realizing I won't ever see it the way it was again.
Mike, Pat Rose here. I have a picture that I'm really proud of Metlaco Falls at Eagle Creek, which burned also in 2017. And I don't know that anybody can go back to Metlaco Falls and see exactly what was there before. The beauty, at least not in our lifetimes. So I share your sense of loss, but I've also been to Opal Creek. It's such a tragedy to lose such a wilderness area to fire. But I'm wondering, to have any kind of benefit, which I'm on board for, I have pictures that I can contribute to the cause. And maybe Pat Welly and your friend the ecologist can weigh in on this. What efforts can be made with the money that we raise outside of rebuilding the forest center, to kind of work to, get the forest on the road to recovery.
Paul, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. I think, am I on? Oh, there we go. There we go. I don't know if you guys can see me, but, and I'm not I know it's on now. I'm not a forest ecologist, but the thing is, probably, from just a quick thought, keeping invasive non-native species out until the native species get a hold in there. And that might not be a problem up there, but nature will do its thing. And as long as some very, very invasive non-native species don't get in there, it should be fine. And we're talking about decades, not a few.
Sure.
We're talking about a very, very long time. But folks, I understand for people who have been there, like Mike and others, this is a tremendous loss to see that beauty gone. But if you look at the glass from the other end, you're witnessing something that nature does all the time.
Right.
And it's pretty astounding that it will recover. And 100 years from now, 200 years from now, whatever, people will be walking through that ancient forest and going, wow, this is an amazing place. So just witnessing that part of the cycle is pretty special in a way.
So Mike, I can go ahead and I have many years of experience doing restoration work, and no, I'm not familiar with Opal Creek, but in my experience, any funds raised, usually there's a dedicated project right away, particularly for something like this. I would imagine there's a checklist of things that need to be done. But in any case, there's always usually new vegetation that needs to be brought in, and the people, you can easily spend a tremendous amount of money doing just that, just revegetating. Again, I don't know what it's like up there, but I could imagine they have quite a list of projects that would need to be done, and any kind of funding towards dedicated to that would be well used.
I don't mean to speak for Nathan, but what he told me was that he would really appreciate it if we could use photographs to maintain awareness in the community of the kind of work that they are doing up there, and how things are progressing with the recovery and the research and the rest of it. That he thinks that would be a very valuable communications tool.
Nice.
Yeah, sounds like it would be wonderful. And thank you, Pat, for answering that question directly about how our funds can be used. So I think
there's never enough funds in a restoration
never
project,
enough funds.
so.
Yeah.
Right on. Anybody else have questions for Mike? Well, I mean, from a PPF standpoint, obviously, we'll have to see about having a committee and look into some of these ideas you had. They all seem good, so I don't see why we can't give that a try.
Philip has a question.
Hey, Michael. How do you go about getting permission to get on the property? I'd hate to have people just run out there tomorrow and get in trouble or something.
You won't be able to get there. That's the simplest. The Forest Service has closed the entire fire area.
Right.
As the center is an inholder, Jawbone Flats is an inholding, they can decide who gets in there. So they would say, yeah, it's okay for you, Phil, to be there because you're going to be one of the photographers that we're going to work with over the years. And they work with the Forest Service to make sure the Forest Service knows what they're doing. But physically, you can't readily get in there now.
All right.
So
Well,
it
thanks.
sounds just quick. Sounds like our if we do sponsor a show, it's going to be all pre-fire. If we do it anytime this year, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is
I have a
fine.
question. I noticed that a lot of your photos are water and a lot of them seem micro as opposed to macro. And I'm curious about that. Do you prefer the close-up as opposed to the proscenium view?
Well, I've taken a lot of photographs that are more general views, but in the summertime when I can be in the stream and I see what the light and the water and the stone are doing together, the artistry of that, I can't help wanting to make images like that. They're just such incredibly beautiful moments. And you don't see them really when you're up on the trail. You have to kind of be in the stream to notice those. But that's probably the least damaging way you can be a human in that forest, is just be in the water and not on the trails.
That's you.
Did I answer your question?
You did. Thank you.
Mike, this is Sherry speaking. I don't have a question for you. I want to say that I love your photos and I love your passion and I love what you want to do. And we're so lucky to have you around.
That's-
Agreed.
Right on. Okay,
Everybody coming, so we'll see what happens, but I'm excited to going forward.
thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Ray.
Mark Danley. Where's Mark? I don't, he must be on the next screen.
I'm right here.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
You got some,
So, sorry, Ray, we gonna say something?
I was just gonna ask you if you've got some pictures you're ready to show us.
I do. I wanted to preface so in some ways, my work is totally different than Mike's, but in a way it's not. And I say that because for me, photography is not just about the photographs. And in Mike's case, it's about trying to use photos to further an ecological or social purpose that's really important. And I really respect that. And in my case, I've done a lot of self-portraits, which is what my work is about. And it's about, in my case, it's about identity and helping people or myself to understand how we develop that identity. So it's not just about pictures of me as a person, but it's, in my case, it's trying to encourage others to explore their own identity. And Mike is trying to use his photographs, I think, to help preserve or help people understand what a natural environment is. So in a way, there's sort of a parallel there, if I could say. So I really appreciate what Mike has done. I will also say that I am I'm the chair of a small gallery in the Pearl District, and there's a possibility, if things go well, that perhaps we could host this idea of having an actual virtual show in the Pearl District for the work for Opal Creek. So maybe Mike and I can talk about that later, which is not what I'm here to do, but it's at least a thought. So something to kind of, put in the back of Mike's mind, because I'm an environmentalist. I used to work in environmental stuff. I was a wilderness planner for many years for the Bureau of Land Management. I understand natural areas really well, and I certainly support work that would try to help people understand what a natural area is and what it does. So with that, I'm going to do something very different, if that's okay. So with that, is anybody seeing this thing?
Yep.
Okay, so I've got 10 photographs in the drawers at Blue Sky, and I'm calling it generally the landscape of identity. And what I'm trying to do is use myself as a way of encouraging others to explore what their own identity is and how we identify that or how we visualize that through photographs. So giving a little bit of context to this work that I've done a lot of street photography, but once COVID hit, that sort of got to the sideline, and I was trying to understand or explore different ways I could still photograph in a meaningful way without actually talking to people that really didn't want to have an interchange with. So I thought, well, why don't I turn the camera on myself as a way of addressing this issue of identity. And so if I can sort of give a context to this, this photograph is not in the drawers, but I think it helps identify what my premise is. So our culture has this idea that somehow we as people can be whatever we want to be. And yet we're given so many things, such as our name, our race, the culture that we live in, language, all these other things that really shape or confine what we can actually be. So what I tried to do with my self-portraits is to understand what that meant for me. So there's one other piece I want to add to this. I want to have a solo show in my gallery in September. So in some ways, the photographs I'm going to show you are almost a test for the ideas that I'm trying to develop. And it's still very fluid. So any comments that I might have that you would be willing to share, I would appreciate that. So I've been very interested in James Baldwin, and he had an interesting quote about roles and the roles that tend to trap us and narrow who we are as a person. And we can accept those roles. We can say, yeah, that's who we are. Or we can say, you know, maybe that's not really true. Maybe for me, I don't want to be pigeonholed. Maybe there's something about who I am that doesn't really lend itself to the cultural norms or to the ideas that other people have about me. So in a sense, that's what I'm trying to explore. What kinds of identities has the world put on me as a white male, Anglo-Saxon, mostly Protestant, ambulatory, heterosexual male? Do I have to necessarily accept all of that? And if I do, how does that manifest itself visually? So the next photographs are really ones that I'm exploring about who I am as a person and whether or not that really represents who I want to be or who I think I am. And this one and some others really get at the issue of, I think we tend to accept as this culture that portraits are this narrow thing that we have to be beautiful, we have to look a certain way, and that's a good portrait. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it also narrows, if it doesn't really represent who we are internally, there's something sort of disconnected there. So what I'm trying to do with this and other photographs in this series is to say, you know, I'm not necessarily the person that you think that I am based on who you know now. There's something underneath that. So the other thing that's interesting about portraiture is, for the most part, we tend to look at portraiture as our face, because our culture has said that's who we are. And some of the work that I've been doing recently is saying, you know, we're more than that countenance, we're more than that visual image of our face, that there's other parts of us that are also important. And for me, I mean, 68 years old, I'm trying to get in touch with not only who I am, but who I'm going to be in 10 years as I age. And I'm trying to become more comfortable with the trajectory that I've got in my own life. This is an interesting one for me, because I was trying to show the dichotomy between, you know, often identities are visualized as one way or the other. So right side, left side, And so this was a visual representation of that dichotomy. And it could be, the goodness or the evil, a lot of different ways that we look at how we present ourselves. And so I was trying in this particular image to show in one image, two sides of my own self. And in this one, what I was trying to represent was that we have all these different pieces that we put together as one identity. And so this was saying those pieces don't always match. And I guess the best way to say it is when I'm out with my friends, I'm a different person than I might be with my family or with a group of people that are very religious, whatever it happens to be. And so this was trying to say our identity, even though we have one image in one sense, we also have many identities within that image. And this was trying to say that sort of issue with one picture. This is one that I was having fun with. I don't particularly like this image. This is the one that I don't particularly think is very interesting, but a lot of people really like it. So this is me sort of talking to myself. And it's really just trying to show that, maybe even I actually often have disagreements internally about who I am or what I should be. And so at some level, maybe this represents that. This is a COVID shot after I shaved myself. I'd grown hair and I was, getting sort of a little bit wild, and I decided to sort of take that off. And then this was representing what I looked like after I decided to join society again, for lack of a better term. Since this photograph was taken, I flipped back to a different persona. I'm not even sure what this represents, but the fellow on my left is actually a real skull. And it was my way of representing my relationship with aging and eventual death, which I think is important to consider, at least from a Buddhist perspective. And this was just a fun photograph I did with my outline of my shaved head and this lichen that I got from a tree. I'm actually not quite sure what this means in a bigger sense, but I liked the photograph, so I thought I'd share it. Just another photograph of myself with a little bit more of a fluid feel to it. And at the very last, this might be a more traditional portrait, but it really sort of represents how I feel about myself as an aging person. And I really like the image just in terms of its softness, but it also has a little bit of an edge to it, which I think is a good way to represent the contradictions that we have within ourselves. So I want to end with a comment or a quote, and you can certainly read that, but I shall gather myself into myself again. I shall take my scattered selves and make them one, fusing them into a polished crystal ball where I can see the moon and the flashing sun. And again, my work is less about me than it's about trying to encourage other people to consider who they are and how they represent themselves in the world. So with that, that's all I've got.
Nice. I have a few questions for you, Mark. I'm curious about like that first blue one where you like you're uplit like some kind of demon. Is that, and and you said something about maybe you're not who you think you are on the outside. I mean, is that supposed to depict a slightly sinister side, or is that just? And how do you choose the colors? I guess, what role does the colors, since they're not very real, play?
Well, I have sort of an attraction to blue, and to me, that's not sinister. That's more introspective at some level. And I didn't mean that photograph to be sinister, as opposed to be, I'm not sure what the word is, but more sort of objective and I don't say in your face, but just out there, just and so it was simultaneously soft and yet also not shrinking back from sort of a more overt view of myself. So that's what that represents to me.
Nice. Hey, Al, looks like you have your hand up.
Second, okay. Yeah, I was wondering, you mentioned, Mark, having a gallery in the Pearl District, and I wondered, is it already up and operating? And because, we're kind of getting at the stage where maybe we can, go back to some semblance of normal life, and part of my normal life is to visit galleries.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure what normal means, but
I don't
it's
either.
gallery. It's Gallery 114. It's right across from Blick on Gleason.
Oh, okay.
And it's been running since, I'm going to say 1992. So yeah, it's been out there for a while. And we're going to have our gallery meeting tomorrow night. And we're going to decide whether or not it's going to be open for first Thursday in March. And I think we're going to open like more or less like a normal gallery in March. If it's not March and something weird doesn't happen, it's going to be relatively soon. So, and March show is Pair, which is we're sponsoring young people, homeless young people who have done art, and we're selling it, if you will, but we're really trying to just show that community has something to say about art and communication. So I'm pretty sure we're going to be open for Pair like a normal gallery on first Thursday in March. And I think that's March 3rd or 4th, something like that. So hopefully, we'll be like welcoming people real time.
Thank you. I'm familiar with Gallery 114 and know a little bit about Pair, so that's good to hear.
Yeah, so Michael?
Mark, I want to just say how much I appreciate the trust that you put in us to share those images of your deeper self.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think most people, myself included, have a hard time doing that. And so I just really think it was very important that you were willing to do it.
Yeah, thank you. I guess a comment about that, if I want to take photographs of some other people, they're trusting me to allow them into their world at some level. If I can't do that, it's basically bullshit, right? So I do a lot of street photography, and I'm asking people that I don't know into their life a little bit. And so I partly did this because I want to understand a little bit what that's like. So there's sort of an underlying motivation to that. But I appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Have
Yeah,
you,
Mark,
just one quick one, Pat. Have you found that people are more receptive to those self-portraits than you thought they'd be? Meaning they're pretty kind to you about them?
I don't think anybody's been unkind. I think some people are perplexed by them.
Right.
And that's okay. I mean, if art can't raise difficult issues, then I think there's something missing in the art.
Right.
And if I can be a little bit of a catalyst to that, that's cool.
Yeah. Pat?
Yeah, Mark, those are wonderful. I applaud you for taking on that project during COVID. A lot of people shut down completely. I was part of my time, I was shut down to my artwork as well. But so that's such an excellent project that you took on. I was intrigued by a couple things. One is the original comment you made about how our identities are forged in society with all these external impulses coming at us to help us or hurt us in how we self-identify.
Right.
But I have to agree with some of your friends who liked the picture, the image of you speaking to yourself, because I think it's not only external forces that define us, you know, as individuals, but I think it's so important to understand it's how we talk to ourselves that is so instrumental in you know, people building their own self-identity. You can do so much damage to yourself, almost as much, maybe even more than external forces might do to you. So that, I thought that was just such a wonderful thing to show. And that's how that photograph spoke to me, even though you don't like it very much. My other favorite was the multiple images to depict the multiple facets of your character that spoke to me. So kudos on this series.
Well, thank you. I just want to comment. So culture is the big gorilla in the room. You know, we grew up in a culture and it tells us more or less what to do, even how to think about ourselves. And at some level, the culture tells us how to evaluate ourselves. And so that picture of two of me, in some ways, is about how the culture is dictating what I should think about myself.
Right.
And it's really hard to get out of that loop,
Mm-hmm.
I
Sure
think.
is.
So, I mean, the image, I find it a little bit trite, but that's okay. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. I'm going to have to think a little bit more about how I might depict that without being sort of, I don't know, trite is probably the best term, but.
Yeah, I don't think it was tried at all.
Okay, well,
Delivered the message.
thank you.
Nice. Anybody else have questions for Mark? I have one last little, you know, what you just talked about with culture. I think it's interesting in that I think that as a rule, our culture has gotten more used to seeing pictures of themselves than ever because of the advent of the phone camera thing. And so I do think that there's less reluctance to having your picture made or making the picture of yourself than there ever was. And I'm not equating what you're doing with selfies. I'm just saying people are more used to seeing visuals of themselves than ever.
Yeah. I'm not sure they delve into anything more than
Oh, no.
a surface identity. I mean, that's the problem with, I mean, we're all dealing with the cell phones. Everybody thinks they're a photographer and a philosopher because they got a cell phone.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and yeah, I don't think so.
Take pictures and text and you're good, right?
Yeah, so.
Thank you,
Anyway.
Mark, for sharing those and for all those thoughts about them. I think it's important to hear that. I like it.
All right, thank you.
Well, I think it's time now for our featured speaker, and I'm going to have Pat Rose introduce her.
I have to unmute myself. Grace, are you here?
I am.
There
Hello.
she is. Okay,
Yeah,
there's your
I'm
lovely
here.
face.
Hi.
Okay, well, let me do a couple minutes here for you, and then I'll turn it over to you.
Okay.
So as I'm just going to read this, so please bear with me. As chair of the featured speakers committee, I have the honor and pleasure of introducing our presenter tonight, the fabulous photographic artist, Grace Weston. Based in Portland via her native New Jersey, Grace is internationally known for her meticulously constructed vignettes that explore the human psychological landscape with drama, quirkiness, and profound insight. Her work has been exhibited in a number of group and solo shows around the world, and her images have graced the covers, no pun intended there, have graced the covers and pages of many publications. She has numerous grants, awards, and honors to her credit, and much of her work is housed in various public and private collections. In 2020, Peanut Press published a limited edition collector's book of her work titled The Neighbors Will Talk, and I am fortunate to be one of the owners. Grace, I'm number 83 out of 100. So I'm very proud of this.
Thank you.
I encourage you to visit her website at gracewestonphotography.com, where you can see much of her work as well as some great videos, including her appearance on Oregon Art Beat a few years ago, and a very cool mini film noir based on her series called The Long Night. So now it's time for our guests, and if you could please hold your questions until after Grace's presentation, I'd appreciate it. At that point, Ray will invite everyone to ask questions, which you can do either in the chat or orally, as we've been doing so far. So please join me now in giving a warm welcome to our guest, Grace Weston. Oh, you're muted, Grace.
Here we go. I already had one meltdown today. So let's hope this all works. It's the first time I'm doing any kind of sharing of a PowerPoint on Zoom. So let's see. Are you seeing a slide?
Yes.
Good.
Perfect.
Okay, but you're not seeing my messy desktop and all the other stuff.
No.
Okay. So I'll start. First of all, welcome. And I want to thank Pat Rose and the Portland Photographers Forum for inviting me to present my work, and to Ray Bittigan for helping me navigate the Zoom platform. So if I do mess up, you can talk to Ray. And thank you all so much for your interest. I do find I need to read notes when I do PowerPoint presentations, so please bear with me here. If you can put your questions, as Pat said, at the end, and then I'm happy to address them. So for those of you who don't know my work, I create miniature staged narrative scenes in my studio with props and sets that I find, alter, or make, and then I light them and photograph them. For as long as I remember, I desperately wanted to be an artist, but exactly what kind or how was a complete mystery. I grew up in New Jersey, and when I was little, my blue-collar dad would bring me to the Museum of Modern Art in New York. He introduced me to Impressionism, Surrealism, and pop art. And that is where I first saw Starry Night, Magritte, Picasso's Goat, and Roy Lichtenstein. I was amazed when my dad told me that Andy Warhol made a 7-hour movie of the Empire State Building doing absolutely nothing. I love the subversiveness of this, and it was the first time I heard the term laughing all the way to the bank. But all was not well in my budding art career. I was stifled and confused in the face of my deep yearnings. Despite these great examples of rule breakers, I was internalizing erroneous notions about artists and art making with a fervor. I was given this John Nagy drawing kit when I was about 7. So with this kit, you were supposed to learn how to shade a cone, a sphere, and a cube. My mom was a real perfectionist, and she would review what I had drawn, erasing parts of it to correct it and make it look right. Of course, now I see that my mom's perfectionism was her struggle to manage a world that was out of her control But at the time, I internalized that there was a right and wrong way to make art, and that product was what was mattered, excuse me. More unhelpful notions. Oops, I'm gonna go back. If it's not really difficult, it doesn't count. Humor is a no-no, art is serious. So if it's fun or funny, it's not legitimate. A real artist can produce at whim, turn the switch on, sit down, crank out masterpieces. Real artists know what they are doing before they do it. And art must be completely original, something nobody has ever seen before. And recently I drew this cartoon in response to that thought. So maybe some of these thoughts are familiar. Needless to say, all of them are a recipe for paralysis. So Mercer County College had a brand new campus and a full art department. My instructors were all working artists who exhibited in New York. Every one of them was male. There I learned more rules. I was taught certain prejudices, fine art versus illustration, fine art versus craft, painting versus all of the secondary arts. And when I asked, I was told there are no women artists in your art history book because women have babies and are not disciplined enough. That's a true story. And then there was a big question, is photography even really art? I discovered Diane Arbus, who tapped into the stranger in all of us. Dwayne Michaels and his wonderful narrative series. I love them so much still. It's another one. Ralph Eugene Meatyard, finding the alien in his own backyard. And I was introduced to one of my favorite images ever, Andre Cortez, Satiric Dancer. In one of my college art classes, we got an assignment to design our own grave sites, fulfilling our teacher's fantasy. So this was my thrown together result, a little bit Dada, but the part I enjoyed the most was inside the birdcage. And looking back, I see a consistent attraction to working with miniatures and setting up narrative scenes like I did when I was a child in my bedroom. In high school and college, I found my people, like-minded artist friends to goof around with. Here's a snapshot of a scene I made with litter found on the beach. Again, it's only significant in hindsight. And if you can't tell, there's a teepee, there's mountains, there's a lake. On the right, there's a robot and a billboard. My buddies and I loved costumes, outer space, and general goofing around. This is me as an outer space magician, I guess. We played with a weather balloon for a couple of hours, and then when it broke, we played with it some more. Some more space friends. And this, as you recognize, is a test strip. It's a movie still. I was part of a royal couple, outer space couple. And as you can see, aluminum foil is a really valuable miracle material. You can do anything with it, as well as garbage bags. Other artists dressed up too. This is Marcel Duchamp as Rose Celavie. Marcel Duchamp said, "It's true, of course, humor is very important to me. In fact, it's the only reason for living." Sonia Delany's incredible Bauhaus costumes. Klaus Nomi with Joey Arias. So now on to my earliest work. This is in New Jersey. I call it Madonna Swordfish. Prometheus at Rockefeller Center, but shot from the back. And actually Arnold Schwarzenegger bought this picture, of course. Urban Cowboy, I call this. This is Coney Island. So I had a lifelong ambition to get out of New Jersey and preferably to make it as far as possible. So I moved, oh, there's another shot, sorry. I moved to California. I landed in paradise, but immediately lost my black and white mojo. The place did not speak black and white to me. I started to explore color. To help simplify and organize the chaos of color in the world, I decided to do a series on pink, an evocative color that somehow stirs up a lot of reaction. And there's a lot of pink in California. This is the Madonna Inn and beauty chair. So these two shots got into, there was a call for entry with women in photography. I had never entered anything before. I knew nothing about showing. And I got into the show and it traveled around the world for like 4 years or more. It went to Bath, England, it went everywhere. And it kind of kickstarted me back into my work and thinking of it as more of a profession, as a fine art profession. So I continued on there with minimized color in scenes showing desolation and the relentless Southern California sun. These scenes all had a lot of humor to me and felt very different than my New Jersey roots. And I eventually returned to some black and white work while in LA, usually interiors. So this is the Griffith Observatory. And this shot to me just has so much mystery and weirdness. I just love it. I still love that picture. And this is also the observatory. After a while feeling isolated in my darkroom, for a number of years, I pursued different art forms where I worked with other people. I became a dancer, an actor, a singer, like everyone else in LA. And eventually I got sick of the relentless sun of Los Angeles, among other things, and I uprooted again. I was photographing in black and white again, but in a more serious, formal way with larger format cameras. I became fascinated with the hangar in Tillamook, where they repaired blimps and did a series on these strange, massive, unsettling things. And if you look on the right, you can see the doorway and the windows. So you see how massive that blimp is. And they had a weird repulsion attraction to these things. Don't ask Freud. So I went there so many times that the guys, the people who worked there, they finally brought me up in the cherry picker. So I got this shot. And although I liked this work, it was more the idea of what I thought respectable photography should be. And I wanted to be a serious artist. At that time, I met photographer Mark Hooper and I became his first studio assistant, even though I tried to tell him otherwise out of pure terror. Mark remains a mentor and a friend, and entering his studio changed my life. I had to start from square one. The learning curve was steep with lighting, large format 4x5 cameras, color film, Polaroids. But even though I had no idea of what I wanted to photograph, the blank canvas was thrilling to me instead of recording what was already in the world. So I started out making still lifes. And this is a bit of an over-romanticized shot of a lunchbox, but how much fun, because I was exploring and discovering how light affected textures and how you could manipulate it and transparency. It was really all about exploring the properties of light and how to manipulate it. I made dozens of these Jell-O molds and countless failed shots over months of time because I was obsessed with creating the magic Jell-O I saw in my head. I could not let it go until I got it, but I learned so much along the way. Here I had fun mimicking portrait lighting sessions with this odd 1930s puppet. And this is an early still life with a hint of narration I entitled After You, Dear. So some other photographers who staged scene, I started to look towards contemporary photographers doing stage narrative photography. I was thrilled to find David Leventhal and his atmospheric images. They were out of focus. Wasn't that breaking a rule? There's Laurie Simmons, Sandy Skoglund, Toon Hawks, who paints on his photographs, Thomas Demand. Every single thing in his images is made out of paper. I don't know how. That's what he does. Or why? And of course, Gregory Crewson, very cinematic. And now stage photography has become much more common. And I love this genre because it accommodates so many different styles and approaches. So I consider this my first successful stage scene that set me in a solid direction. It seemed to come together effortlessly. And it's the only one that is human scale. After this, I went to miniature. There's that guy again. This is Baby Makes 3. And I started experimenting more with lighting and optics, effects that you can't see on the set, but show up in a shot through manipulation of focus light and reflections. This is First Impressions. Secret. I started to get in the groove, finding my own voice that felt true to me. This piece, called Heaven Help Us, was selected for the clown show at the Frolic Gallery in Portland, and it was used for the poster for the show. Nighty night. Winter thaw. I call this Girls Gone Wild. You can see I like surrealism. I did a couple of small jobs for Portland Monthly. They were trying me out for a column that would tackle two opposing sides of an issue. In this case, the dredging of the Columbia River. I was only given the direction of farmer versus fisherman, and that the images had to relate. The surface is embossed cardboard, so it represents the field, of course, for the farmer. And then I turned it the opposite way, spray painted it to be the waves for the fisherman. And the fisherman's raincoat is made from a balloon. And this is the spread. So they were very happy with the shots, and they hired me to do the cover of the Neighborhoods issue. They wanted an idyllic Portland scene of a typical Portland house on a beautiful spring day, and that was the extent of the direction. So I created this image. The roof, the house is foam core, and then the roof is a gorgeous magenta sandpaper I found at the hardware store. This is also where I learned to work with a reticulous deadline. And here's the cover. And this issue sold more copies than any issue they had published before. So moving on, some other pieces. I call this Honeymoon, and it's based on an almost true story of my own honeymoon. I call this The Initiate. Torn between two lovers. Petting zoo. And this was inspired by The Unicorn in Captivity. This is Laundry Day, and it was for a show commemorating the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Happy hour. So these are my studio drawer. Actually, I have more drawers in this now. And inside, all kinds of tiny things. There is an organization to this that only I know. This is a shot called Rise and Shine, and sometimes an old idea resurfaces in your consciousness. When I was moving, years after I made this image, I found a 2-part cartoon I had drawn in college that I had completely forgotten about. So back to laundry day, I'm often asked to bring my dioramas to display when I exhibit photographs, and I have to explain it's not a contained set. Outside the frame, it's not what they think. Everything is held together with clamps, spit, and glue. Even a breeze can cause the collapse of a prop. You saw this image earlier. Now here's the set to show how very different the set looks from the photograph. And to me, that's the fun, the sleight of hand. That's the part that makes me laugh when I'm alone in my studio about photography. And I was later commissioned to recreate the scene in vertical for a book cover. This is House of Atlas. And here's some of the process that goes into figuring out the palette and the materials and the logistics. I made this dress probably 6 different times before I settled on the right fabric. And then remember my favorite photo, Satiric Dancer. I took a little couch, took the legs off it, reupholstered it. And the most important thing to me about that photo is her neck piece. And how was I going to make that? I went throughout my house looking at everything I had, and I found the nozzle from a nose spray bottle I cut down and spray painted and attached it to her dress. And here they are. Now, of course, without breaking my doll, she's not as articulated as the model, but I got pretty close. And I do want to point out that on the upper right of my image is the original Cortez image. So if I can't find the right prop or in the right scale, I have to figure out how to make it. So this is a little top hat I made from a dropper from a bottle, and then add a little glitter, and now it's a fancy New Year's cap. This started out as a little metal attaché case. I built it up to be fatter and added fabric to make it a suitcase. Matches. An ashtray with cigarettes. You're kind of seeing the wrong side of the cigarettes, but this is lollipop sticks that I unwound to the right diameter and cut down and colored. Virginia Slims. This is one of the hardest props I ever made. Venetian Blinds. They're made from strips of glossy photo paper, and each slat is curved over a dowel before I tried to lay them out here. Curlers are made from straws and the loop side of Velcro. I searched the internet. I needed a very specific 1960s washing machine, and I couldn't find the one I wanted and the color I wanted, so I made it from foam core. And sometimes a character needs a makeover, and so I needed a guy here who had a beard. And there's lots of research and development in my work too. So I needed bloody rags, and you probably know blood is a different color when it's fresh or older. So I was researching that and trying to find the right hue. And also the fabric, the weave has to be small enough that it reads properly in the picture. So if I have a towel, it has to look like a towel or a rag. And here's a set you might recognize. The picture's on the left. In 2011, with the downturn in the economy, my husband and I moved to Seattle for his work. Moving once again seemed to shake up my photo mojo, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do in my next work. And as you might have gathered, I have a tendency to be pretty tight and meticulous in the studio. I felt what I needed was to relax, loosen up, which is hard for me, and just play with no expectations on outcome. I started goofing around the studio with my iPhone, super close-up portraits, just playing with characters I have in the studio to loosen me up. And with this casual play in characters, I was breaking a lot of rules for myself. Maybe nothing has to be in focus. Maybe more is said with less information. And this brought me to a series I call Neo-Noir. I call this On the Train, Socialite, Tryst. Guilty Conscience, Playboy, Amnesia. This is Anonymous Witness. This is maybe my favorite one, and you can't get more minimal than that. Bully. This is Gossip. Man of Mystery. So these images are printed full bleed to hang individually or in combination. I presented them at Waterstone Gallery in Portland in a grid. And I showed them in Seattle as well. So obviously this series references 40s crime novels and 60s spy films, but it was also a reflection of my state of mind in my new city. After the comfort and familiarity of my Portland life, I suddenly was the stranger. This series revealed my sense of alienation, confusion, and mystery, with questions unanswered and isolated characters immersed in unspoken thoughts. Of course, I only made these connections once I was writing my artist statement. We often don't know what drives our work when we are submerged in the creation of it. I published the series in a book with Blurb, and a Seattle friend offered to design the cover and layout. So we returned back to Portland after 4 years in Seattle, and I struggled with a new vignette. While working on it, I became more interested in the scene out the window than in the room. So when I broke the set, I thought I'd play around with shots of the outdoor scene. I like the idea of night shots. So what if I ditched all the studio lights and allowed for only minimal lighting with whatever tiny light sources I could find? And this led to The Long Night. These images are printed as dye sublimation on aluminum, flush mounted, which adds a very cool, slick feeling in keeping with the mood of the imagery. And the work is somewhere between neo-noir and my heavily detailed narrative vignettes. I enjoy the atmospheric and provocative things, the look of that. With less information, less allows the viewer to see more. I had this work in the Blue Sky viewing drawers during COVID. Because of the pandemic, instead of showing our work in person, Blue Sky asked us to make a video about our work and post it online. I hired a friend, filmmaker Ian Lucero, to help me make a film that captured my spirit of the spirit of the series. And I had a little trouble earlier today with the sound, so I'm hoping the sound comes across for you. All right. So I was invited to show at 9 Gallery in Portland, which is a showcase known for installation work, which I had never done before. I was told I could do whatever I wanted. The wide open option terrified me, but I said yes, and it challenged me on many, many levels. So I ended up, the installation was called Escaping Gravity, Breathing, Dying, Swimming, Flying. When my older brother was 8 years old, he drowned in a nearby pond a week after we had moved from the city to the country. And although he died when I was 4, I remember him vividly. He was good to me, very protective and lots of fun. Out of my parents' concern and fear, swimming pools and any bodies of water were off limits to me after that. I grew up not knowing how to swim. I was not afraid of water. In fact, I love the ocean and I spent countless Southern California days in it, but I only knew how not to drown. I didn't know how to get from A to B. So when I was in Seattle at this late age, I finally learned how to swim. I discovered adult swimming classes at a local pool. I signed up and practiced regularly to get better, and now I swim 3 times a week, and it's been a lifeline. Water brings me joy, not fear. I belong there. So swimming is very meditative. It's a perfect atmosphere for the mind to wander. As a visual person, it's impossible not to marvel at the light interplaying with water. It also makes sense that I often think of my brother when I swim. So for my installation, I thought of referencing my connection to my brother, to the tragedy that so deeply affected my family, and to the beauty, joy, healing, and liberation swimming is to me. This resulted in the most personal and vulnerable work of my career. I still wanted to work with miniature elements for the photography parts of my installation. I had a special tank made to hold water above my articulated doll to get the distorting effect of the movement of the water. So I hope you can see what's going on there. The little tank towards the right, the doll underneath it, and spoons and things like that to stir the water on the left. And these are some of the images I got from it. I love the distortion that the water provides. And I even wanted the lane divider rope to be miniature, so I created that. My brother drowned in a pond, so I wanted to make an image that represented that. The story goes that he jumped in to go after a turtle. Many more elements went into creating the installation. My husband helped with carpentry of the structures. Everything had to be ready to install on set within 3 days. After many months of working and planning, this is the installation. On the right is my artist statement and the picture of my brother and me. The installation was divided into two chambers, a pond room and a pool room. Looking the opposite way from my statement, you see the pond. The vellum pages in the pond room are taken from the newspaper article reporting the incident, as well as a faded unsent letter found in a box at my parents' house after my mother passed. The letter is to a friend, either a draft or just never sent, and it details the tragic day and the numerous things that went wrong to set the stage for my brother's death. The local ambulance was out for repair. The workmen on the site next to the pond were off that day because of rain the night before. The woman that at first didn't believe the playmates when they told her what happened, and when she did see my brother's feet in the water, instead of pulling him out, she called her husband a town away. It was wrenching to read those grief-ridden pages, things I had never heard before, and it gave me insight into my family and especially my mother. So this is a close-up of one of the article, and the other papers are blown up and printed on envelope from my mother's letter. And that's the banner of the pond image. And on the right, there are streamers, strips of fabric that are swamp colored, greenish on the pool side, on the pond side, and then blue on the pool side. So you go through the streamers into the pool. And there I had the chiffon banners printed with my swimmers. I set up fans to move the banners, and I rented theater lights to project the moving surface of the water on the ceiling. And I had a recorded loop of the sounds of water splashing. And looking back at the streamers from the back of the pool towards the pond, that's what that looked like. And there's a video for this, and I know the sound is very low on it, so I'm going to try to bring it up, but we'll see what happens. So the installation wiped me out. It took everything I had. Oops, I lost something here. Here we go, sorry. I felt very vulnerable and I didn't know how it would be received. As it turned out, far beyond my expectations, many people were deeply moved and shared stories of losing loved ones or fear of water or being thrown in the water as a kid to sink or swim. Back in the studio, I was at a complete loss as to what to do next. Time passed by. I felt stuck and guilty for not using my time in my beautiful studio. Then COVID arrived. Still feeling stuck, I started to just goof around with characters to reflect my feelings in this new bizarre reality, and to try to get in touch with my creativity in a looser, playful way with no pressure, and to make nothing I would consider my real art, just play. So as we were all getting used to Zoom, I just put a character in front of a magazine photo, making fun of it, making fun of our new reality. Just little throwaways, having fun, just with window light, not even taking my lights out. And I have so many nice little props. I just started enjoying just the characteristics of my props. And to me, it's so amazing the gesture or attitude you can get out of these inanimate objects, often just with the slightest shift in the angle of your camera. You can give them personality. And this is a little Carmen Gia model I have that I think is just so detailed and lovely. So I have so many tiny characters. To keep up my Instagram posting, I started doing portraits of them. And the characters are so small that when magnified by the camera, all the flaws and weird details show, along with a lot of personality. And I was posting these on Instagram. Oops, here we go. And giving them names or titles like, this is makeup tutorial, middle manager. This guy's amazing. Working class hero. You are what you think. Bedeviled. I mean, with the naked eye, he never looks this weird, but you blow it up and it's incredible. I posted one a day for 50 days. It was really fun. It was a great way to amuse myself and to stay in touch with people. And I played with another image at the same time in this grouping to express a little humor with the pandemic isolation, again with just available light and no pressure. And the scene started to build and it took on a life of its own effortlessly and became a real shot for me that I added to my portfolio. And I called it Home Alone. So while I was watching other artists make all kinds of incredible artwork, during this period, I caught myself feeling like I wasn't making legitimate art or being productive, that maybe I'd never find my footing again. I also felt like everyone knew I wasn't producing, as if anyone but me gave it a thought. And the old feeling of fraud was creeping in. I stopped entering shows. I gave up on pursuing galleries. I questioned if I'd ever have a new idea. And I even considered quitting this art career of mine. And I had to remember to recognize those thoughts as just the old voices and ride this out, knowing that the one thing that is true is that things are always in flux. So somehow during this fallow period, Peanut Press reached out to me to publish a limited book of my work entitled The Neighbors Will Talk, along with an edition print. It sold out. A photography gallery in Russia contacted me to exhibit in Yekaterinburg. And there's Russians lecturing on my work and Russians looking at it. I had work in Blue Sky's viewing drawers and made that film to accompany the Zoom presentation of it. I had a show in New Jersey and Pat Rose interviewed me for Oregon Arts Watch. Thank you, Pat. So it became clear to me that no one else knew I wasn't producing. And now I realized I was doing what artists need to do: play, reflect, process, rest, feel, question, do nothing, do anything, and cook. Eventually, a new series started to come into focus, sparked by a couple of earlier pieces and growing from there. I like the idea of restaging famous photographs. Here's Judy Dater's photograph of Twinka and Imogene in the Redwoods, and my version. While recreating my first favorite photo, Satiric Dancer, I became curious about the muse, the dancer. Who was she? What was her life like? Why did we know so much about the photographer, but nothing of his subject? After some research, I uncovered her name, Magda Forster, and that she had been a cabaret performer with a successful career of her own. But other than that, she's lost to history. Next, I restaged the scene again, but into a contemporary setting. I removed her from the romanticized vision of the decorative object and portrayed her negotiating the unglamorous reality of daily life. Continuing in this vein, I'm examining familiar muses and restaging these women in contemporary art scenes. And of course, this is not a novel idea. Creating variations and reinterpretations is an age-old tradition practiced throughout art history. Focusing on the women in these old stories, historic artworks, and mythology, sometimes seen or not acknowledged, sometimes unseen, excuse me, or not acknowledged as anything other than the object. Oh, I was right. My idea is to present the muse from her viewpoint, furthering the issues important to me as a contemporary female artist. So again, House of Atlas, Leda and the Swan, or No Means No, I also call it. This is Artemisia Gentileschi's Judith and Holofernes, which many of you have seen. There's many paintings of this incident, or of Judith and her handmaiden carrying the basket with Holofernes' head. And this is my version. The basket's actually very important. Many of the paintings, as I said, Judith and her handmaiden went to town with Holofernes' head in the basket. So I really wanted the laundry basket, but I decided for composition to have Holofernes' head on the floor. And anyway, who wants to get their laundry bloody? Medusa. So Medusa was a beauty who was raped by Poseidon and then punished for her rape by a jealous Athena, who cursed her with snakes and ugliness so that no man could look upon her again. And in the end, she was slain like a monster. No justice. So here's my Medusa having a self-care day. Mythology is filled with stories of women who are made to pay for the sins of men, the so-called heroes and gods of mythology. So I have plenty of rich material to work with. Here's my version of Botticelli's Birth of Venus, entitled Venus and the Pill. And next, I plan to work on the Three Graces. I don't know who said this, but it certainly applies to me. Creativity is the mechanism of self-liberation. Every year I make a New Year's card for my collectors, and I'll end with it here. So thank you. I'd love to take questions if you guys have any.
Grace, this is Janis Miklovson. I have two questions.
Yes.
Early on, you said, you were going through this art school and you were learning about that art. There was from your mom, there was a right and wrong, and then you learned you can't do humor. Was there an event, or what changed all that in you? I don't know if I heard that from your story.
It was a long, like those thoughts still creep in. I've done a lot of work on myself, for one. I still get the voices, but I've learned better. I think it really stunted me early on in my life. I was, definitely, I feel like I was a very late bloomer. I wish let's see, I want to be able to see you guys all.
Here, I can do that for you. What?
Yeah, I want to see people. Hi. Yeah, so I was a late bloomer. It took me a long, long time to have confidence. And most of my life, I would tag on to other people who were creative and I felt they were successful artists. And I'd even act a lot as the support person. But it just took me a long time. It took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to do and then to develop my skills and then to drop the rules. Like I said, when I moved to Oregon, I still believed, oh, the photography should be serious and it should be formal. And I got a lot of feedback like that, I have to say. I got people who said, well, especially at the beginning when I was first doing more humorous work or working with the miniatures, people were like, yeah, but that's not real work. I would hear that. And so I even went back and forth. I was like, well, should I work commercially? Should I work in fine art? Where do I fit? And I finally got to a point where I was like, I'm just going to do what I do. And then things kind of started to come to me. So if I've learned anything, it's to pay attention to your own voice, and the people that dig it will come to you and those that don't won't, and none of that matters because you're starting to please yourself. And that's what matters the most, you know? I think Mark Ryden said it. He said, enchant yourself and other people will be enchanted, you know? So I kind of like gave up pleasing others and just started to please myself. Yeah, I didn't know where it was going to go.
Nice.
And I also think photography, I think we've seen great changes in the last 15 years or so. And it's much more wide open now, and it's much more, there's all kinds of different stuff going on. So I applaud that. I think it's great.
Anybody else have questions for Grace?
Well, I guess I have another one.
Okay, Giannis.
Grace, like, how long does it take you to create an image? For example, like the house image that you did that was
For the Portland Monthly.
yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy because it was a deadline. And I don't work with assistants, and I don't have stylists, and I don't have prop people. And so I had to do that all myself. And I think I had to do it in a week, which is friggin' crazy for me. Like my Judith and Holofernes, that took over a month. From concept to gathering materials, to building the props, to getting the set, to setting it up, to, you know, on and on. So the Portland Monthly thing was crazy. And I really barely slept. And I felt like everything was on the line too. But they were thrilled, you know, and I was happy, you know.
Nice.
Yeah, but it can be, you know, that first image I showed, the one, the full-size one, that set me in the direction. That one, for some reason, you know, I had some of those things, I put them together, it came together in hours. So there's no formula, it all depends.
So to tag on to that, Grace, so I know you get a lot of your ideas from established artists like Andre Cortesh, of course, and some of the other famous people, and you seem to take those images as kind of a starting point, but then of course you just take off in your own direction. So how I mean, do you start off with like a storyboard and you have sort of the end in mind and you kind of work to fulfill it? Or do you kind of think of things as you go along and you don't have a storyboard, you just sort of wing it? Or how does that work?
It really varies. Oh, I see Yvette. Hello, Yvette. Yvette's in Chicago. That varies too. I have a sketchbook where I have lots of ideas written down or drawn, you know, sometimes drawn. But the image often doesn't lay out like the drawing did. I don't use storyboards per se, but sometimes once I get props together on a set, I start working with the composition and, you know, I see it in my head. You'll notice most of my images are verticals. I just got in that habit with the Long Night series and with the Neo-Noir, and I really kind of like it. And once I did the Peanut Press book, it ended up like that was awesome, because having verticals for a book is a great, format. And I just like composing in that. So I get my items onto the set and I just start composing. Now, sometimes, as you see, some of the images really mimic the original that I took it from, and some are not like it at all. They're just based on the story. So yeah, I don't know. Once I start working on the set, it kinds of, things start to come together.
So Grace, do you spend a lot of time going to yard sales and flea markets?
Hi, Rob. So you guys, I gotta tell you, this is the other aluminum foil royalty guy from space, outer space. And I appreciate that you came down from your planet to join us. I used to go to a lot of yard sales and flea markets, but now I search online and I can almost, I so often can find whatever prop I'm looking for. I recently got a gas mask for my next shot. Miniature, it's amazing what you can find now on Etsy or eBay. So it's pretty great. Yeah, but in the past, I was much more at the mercy of what I found, whereas now I can search with an idea of what I'm looking for and find it more often.
Grace, do you find that you get as much enjoyment from making the props and creating the set as you do from taking the picture? I mean, is it taking the picture almost not secondary, but the last bit and less of it than the rest?
I do. I love the prop making. There's a lot of problem solving with that. And sometimes it's very frustrating if I can't get it to look the way I want, or I don't quite have the skill to make what I want to make because I'm not a sculptor and I don't sew and all of that. But I really enjoy lighting. And so working with that part is really pleasurable to me too. The part I don't love is sitting at the computer, cleaning objects up. And I have to say, I do appreciate Photoshop. I don't composite, but in the old days with film, I would get something back and there would be a tiny piece of lint on a bird that I couldn't see through the viewfinder, but showed up on the film, and I would reshoot. I wouldn't break my set until I got that film back, and I would have to reshoot things. So it's so great to be able to clean things like that up, or erase wires that are suspending something. But the computer part is really, that's not what I love. I love being in the studio, working on the set or working with props and lighting. I do love lighting. I love light. Light is very magical.
Yeah, I think the photography part is remarkable because you're just such a skilled set lighter. Just the way you light those tiny scenes is just remarkable. It just, like I think you mentioned yourself, it sort of, the lighting brings even a sort of a flat, just the perspective of the camera can help bring that model or set to life.
Yeah, it really does. Lighting it's really a magic element. It's incredible. And I'm very grateful that I assisted Mark Hooper. I learned so much about light working with him and my early experimentations. And now, when I look back at my older work, some of it is just lit so flatly. I just, even if the content is interesting, I pulled some pieces out that some people really love, but they're lit so flatly, I don't like them anymore. They bother me. Yeah, so you tell so much with light. And then that's the other thing. I think early on, I really thought, oh, you have to light a certain way and you have to know. And then as I went on, as you saw, like when I got to the long night, I was like, what if you don't even use lights? What if you only use something that lights up your zipper when you're running, and that's what I used. I used like tiny LEDs, nothing else, which was liberating because I didn't have to decorate an entire set. I only had to light what was important and let the rest go to black. So yeah, I guess it's been like a lifetime of liberating myself from these rules and these ideas, that I had preconceived.
One of your images that comes to mind when you say you thought it was flat, I heard you say that before about your, one of my favorite photos of yours is Current Affairs.
Oh, yeah, I didn't put that in.
But you didn't put that in. I was hoping to see that because I think you said
I'm
you didn't
sorry.
like the lighting.
I should some people have said, why don't you shoot it again if you don't like it? And I don't know if you feel like that, but sometimes going back to do something you've already done, I did it. I don't
Yeah.
like it, but yeah, it's flat to me, but it is it's a good concept.
Such a great.
Oh, thank you.
we
It's
got-
for you guys who haven't seen it, it's someone, it's a guy sitting on an ice cube reading a newspaper with a noose around his neck. And the cats are in the corner eating their food and the clock's ticking away.
Just
So,
waiting for the ice cube to melt.
yeah, we're really there, aren't we?
I think we
Yeah.
got two more questions and then it's then I think we're out of time, but
Oh,
Bruce,
gosh.
did you have a question, Bruce?
Yeah, I just said, well, a comment, your Peanut Press book, you must know Ashley, that's my niece.
You're kidding. Oh, Ashley's great.
Small world,
Oh.
huh?
Yeah, small world. She and David, I love them both. Well, I've never met Ashley in person. I've met David when I was in New York. But they're great people and I love what they're doing.
Yeah, she's between LA and New York, back and forth.
Yeah.
Nice.
They're doing a great job.
Yeah, they are.
Beautiful books, yeah. Cool.
Yvette?
Yvette has her hand raised.
Yeah, I just was calling them. You have to unmute, Yvette.
Oh, Yvette, you're on mute.
Okay,
There you go.
thank you. This was so wonderful, and I loved how you showed us everything behind the scenes and all. What I would love to see is someone taking a photo of you actually doing a photo shoot, like
Oh,
how you get into it. Do you have a preferred lens that you use? Do you use macro primarily, or can you say anything?
my lens is just a normal macro that I use now. And in the past, when I had my medium format working with film, I had a lot of close-up filters and things like that and extension tubes.
Mm.
Yeah, but yeah, my Canon now I use the same damn lens for everything. But some of the, the Neo-Noir stuff, the real out of focus stuff, those were, what were they called? They're these little lenses you put on your phone. They had a little macro lens I could pop on my phone, throw
Right.
everything out of focus and just play with that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, it was wonderful. Thank you, Grace. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you,
And-
guys.
You're so prolific. I mean, there are other favorites of mine that didn't make it either. That psychiatrist couch I love.
Oh, yeah. Couples
Mhm.
therapy. Yeah. Yeah, well, it looks prolific. It's a lot of years. I always feel like I'm really slow, but weirdly, at this point in COVID, I've really suddenly picked up. I think the isolation has been really good for my creativity, good for I have plenty of time in the studio. I don't do anything, but I
Right.
swim, I go to the grocery store once a week, and then I go to my studio, all the rest of the time and sleep. So it's really stepped things up for me recently, once I got out of my phone.
It was very generous of you to share all this. Thank you.
Oh, I was thrilled. Thank you. Thank you,
Yes.
guys.
Thank
Great,
you.
Pat. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you,
You're welcome,
Grace.
Grace. It's
Bye.
wonderful.
Very nice. Perfect.
Thanks.
Ray, can you and Grace just stick around while everybody else goes away so I can say one final word to Grace?
Sure.
Okay. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night, thank you.
Well, Grace, thank you so much. Oh my goodness. I know you were nervous, but you couldn't tell and you went just above and beyond. It was just wonderful.
Oh, thank you. I hate having to read my notes, but it's so weird because when I am in a gallery doing a walk with my work, I can talk spontaneously, but these PowerPoints, I just have to have written notes. I don't know.
I feel
Yeah.
absolutely.
Awkward.
Otherwise I trip over my words and say things out of order and blah. So,
It just feels like you're talking into space. It's hard.
yeah. Yeah, this was, I had a total meltdown this afternoon.
Oh,
Ray.
no.
Well, the sound, it sounded like the sound worked fine for you. And then my husband and I, we tried it again and he couldn't hear it. And the sound for the movies. So
Did you do the share computer sound?
yes, well, I think we did. Where'd you find that? Oh, God.
I think that's when you're first sharing, there's a chance it says share computer sound.
It was, yeah. I don't
Because
know,
it did
was-
work really well. It was harder this time, but it did work really well on the trial run.
Yeah, on the trial run, it did. And then, yeah, well, I'm glad you could hear that. I know the swimming pool one is much softer. It's very hard to hear, so.
Yeah, that was difficult. We just heard a few little gurgles.
Yeah, yeah. Thankfully, everybody knows what water splashing sounds like.
Anyway, so thank you so much, Grace. That was a delight. And
Really my pleasure. It's so nice to see you, Pat, because I don't think I've seen
I know
you.
we haven't met in person.
Yeah.
Grace and I have worked together on that article and all this, and
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan. And so it's so nice to finally meet you in person. One of
Yeah.
these days, when all is said and done with this monster that we're dealing with, we'll have to meet for coffee or something.
Yeah, definitely.
Love that.
Yeah, I would love that too. I'm looking forward to that. I'm getting a little tired of all this, and everybody else is too.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's
Yeah.
hard. All right.
Okay.
Thanks. Good to see you, Ray, and I'll be in touch soon.
Thanks again, both of you. I
And
really appreciate it.
Thank you,
take
Grace.
care. Bye-bye.
Good night.